It's the ERP Confab. I'm David Essex, industry editor at Informa TechTarget's ERP website. User interfaces have come a long way from the unforgiving character-based green screens of early days to today's standard graphical UIs in web browsers and, most recently, generative AI for natural language search and voice control. John Bates has a vision to take UIs much further with deep learning that anticipates people's needs and drives self-aware digital documents that can communicate what they are and the information they contain, and in effect speak to people and computers. He claims that as content becomes more conscious, it will be able to initiate actions, eliminate language differences, and deliver new insights from an enterprise's knowledge base. A former Cambridge University Don and founder and executive at numerous tech companies, he's now CEO of SER Group, a London-based maker of enterprise content management software, and on the board of Sage, the British business applications vendor. In the podcast, he explains how these sentient documents will work and why today's AI isn't really intelligent despite the hype. He also shares why he believes people are losing enthusiasm for natural language interfaces. So, John, I'm wondering if you can give our listeners a definition of what a sentient document is.
I mean, a sentient document is a document that you can actually interact with as if it was a colleague. So, in other words, it has some intelligence. And what I mean by that is, for example, a contract that you can ask, what are you? What kind of contract are you? Who are the parties? When does the contract start date? When's the contract finish date? And the document would actually be able to tell you. So it's like adding a conversational generative AI element, if you like, to documents. It could be a resume. You can ask, well, does this person have Java skills? Or it could be any kind of, it could be a change of address letter in a foreign language even, and you could interact with the document in your own native language. So, and of course the document might be intelligent enough to actually be able to answer you in your own language, but about the content in a foreign language. So that's what a sentient document is.
What are the necessary technical elements and maybe different technologies and maybe even standards that need to be in place or are essential parts of this type of dynamic digital document?
I think the first concept here is that you actually need to be able to have an element of automated document understanding. And so that's the ability to, be able to break down a document that you might be receiving, could even still be on paper, that still exists, but most typically it'll be in a digital format, but it could be in any format. So you're going to need to have a framework of being able to recognize sort of an OCR type framework, but then probably a deep learning based recognition system where you can break down that document into its necessary elements. Could be the forms within the document, and then you'll need to have natural language processing technology to be able to recognize the language in there. And what we're then trying to do is to be able to extract metadata from that document. In other words, extract the key information about the document, and it's that metadata that you can then use to be able to, ask questions about it. And so in the question asking, you're going to want to have essentially a NLP-based generative AI type interface that has access to the metadata around the document so that you can then, interact with it. So you're bringing together a number of commonly available technologies, but you're putting them in such a way that you can understand and then interact with a document. And you're probably going to base this around a next generation document management system that natively understands metadata. So I like to think of it as a metadata fabric underlies this, so you're able to bring together all the AI elements on the way in, on the way out, along with sort of the processing elements, the storing, managing, searching, sharing elements, all based around metadata.
Now, are there any industry standards or de facto standards that help with this, or variations of which could help to maybe universalize this? I don't know if it's something XML based or something more recent than that.
Yeah, I mean, the way that you represent your metadata, you can use industry standards like XML, JSON, and this kind of thing. But in terms of the way you actually put this kind of framework together, this is really on the cutting edge. So there's no industry standards per se, but there's certain approaches. Like, for example, in my company SER, we've taken an approach to this. We call it intelligent content automation, which is the way you put together a framework to make this happen. But I would say not at this next generation document platform level, there's no standards, but the pieces within it to be able to represent and share metadata, yes.
What do we have today that comes closest to your vision for this new type of document?
I think there's a number of very commonly processed documents in the enterprise. Obviously, one of them, probably the most commonly automated type of document, is probably the invoice. And the automating around the invoice comes in many different shapes and sizes, but typically in an enterprise world, you're going to have an ERP system like an SAP or an Oracle or similar, in which you're going to cross-reference an incoming. You're going to want to cross-reference an incoming invoice against, but there may also be parameters such as fraud. You're going to want to check that it's not fraudulent in any way, so you're probably going to want to look at patterns over time to make sure that it's not sort of a different bank account or something like this. And so the invoice is probably the most common document that people might start with, because it interfaces with so many different systems, and it obviously is in the very commonly in the B2B world. So asking questions about invoices, and of course international invoices are coming in different languages and different styles. So that's definitely one. But I think probably the one that people are most excited about in terms of sentient documents is contracts, because they are much more complicated, free form, and if you can come along and say to your contract library something along the lines of, does this new contract intersect or conflict with any existing contracts? You can ask these documents to essentially analyze whether they're in conflict with each other. I think that's the one that's really exciting people the most.
Since you've mentioned contracts, I'm wondering, is there any commonality with what you've just described with the blockchain-based smart contracts that we've been hearing about for some time now?
I think, definitely in terms of, I think that's giving you sort of provability, isn't it? That this contract is the wonderful thing about blockchain, that you've got certainty around what it is. So I think that definitely helps you. But I think in terms of actually being able to analyze a contract itself, they can be any level of complexity, and you need to actually be able to understand the contract to be actually able to analyze it. So I'm not sure if the blockchain, once a human's sort of put their stamp on it, yes, but I think if you want to do some automation around the understanding of a contract, this is something completely new that doesn't exist today.
My understanding, I'm not a technical person, but it seems as if the smart contract that are done over blockchain are essentially programs. They're set up. There's no like AI. There's no, at least now, machine learning or whatever that's being done.
Yes.
Or analysis of the meaning. In previous statements, you have emphasized the importance of agentic AI in helping manage an explosion of data and digital documents. Can you explain what you envision for agentic AI in this particular context?
We've talked so far about interacting really via a prompt-driven sort of style, but I think with the amount of information and documents flowing into businesses, I mean, there's some statistics that I've seen that say that this year alone 150 zettabytes of content and documents will flow in and have to be processed by businesses. So 150 billion terabytes. And so this is a huge amount, obviously, and we're not going to be able to interact with that manually. So I think there's going to be essentially librarians that are intelligently analysing both documents as they enter a business and documents in the background of a business, because certainly businesses that we deal with, very big international enterprises, are managing billions of documents, and in some cases they're adding millions every day. And certainly tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands every day flowing into them. So these are vast challenges, and in that, a lot of the data that you've got in these businesses is dark. And what I mean by that is it's somewhere in the business, but it might not be managed, but it might hold some key secrets for the business. So take, for example, human resources data. You might be every year doing reviews with your colleagues. They might be getting colleagues to do surveys, and you might be, you've obviously got resumes about people, and hidden within all this information, there might be, a trail of breadcrumbs which could tell you, well, actually this colleague's really annoyed. They've applied for a job twice, they've been pushed back, but they've been labelled as a high potential colleague, and they're probably somebody we're going to lose if we're not careful. But that's hidden in some dark data in various files or folders. And similarly, there might be nuggets around customers who've been saying, look, I'd like this new feature or this request, or I'm unhappy about this. And there might be a line of breadcrumbs that there's a risk of churn. Or indeed, similarly, we might be missing an opportunity to upsell to a customer, which is hidden out there across lots of different systems. And maybe it's in your ServiceNow, and it's in your, maybe there's things hidden in, in support requests and so on. So if you can have agentic AI type processes along the lines that we've been talking about, but essentially mining documents, looking, first of all, you've got to connect these dark documents, but then if you can do this and light up these patterns across by asking a series of questions in the background and then flagging up high profile scenarios, obviously things like medical, which of these patients might have cancer from a set of hints that we might have, or might have some disease or be at risk of disease. There's obviously tremendous value to be unlocked through patterns across diverse documents.
Do you have any sense at this stage of when that might happen?
I think it's happening right now. We're at the starting stage of these things going on and using agents to mine these nuggets. And I think it's currently not as deep as we will go and not as exciting as we can get to, but it's definitely happening for looking for things right now, fraud or other types of scenarios. And I think this is just the start. We're at the cusp of this era.
You've also said, or I think written, something I found very interesting that I feel like I don't hear much nowadays, which is that the current focus on enabling people to control computers by speaking or writing a natural language will give way to what you call anticipatory interfaces. So yes. I guess my first question about that is, can you explain why you think people are losing their enthusiasm for natural language interfaces?
Yeah, I think people are just a little bit, I don't know if lazy is the right word, but being able to express themselves in this flowing language, it takes a while. And, we all just want to get it done right now. And in many cases, when you've, let's say you want to review there's a document which is the minutes of a meeting or something like that. I mean, the interface should know you're going to come and say, can I have a summary of the meeting? And it can probably anticipate that and say, here's three options. Do you want to get a summary of the meeting? Do you want to see the actions of the meeting? Do you want to, see the conclusion of the meeting, or the chair's introduction or something? So it's likely based on what are common requests and what you are interested in, that we should be able to anticipate and provide a set of things that's a sort of another semi-sentient leap forward. And I think that's what we're going to commonly see. I think, it's great that we've got prompts. There's now lots of jobs I notice, for all around prompt engineering. And prompts, which were supposed to be super simple, are now becoming super complex in their own right. So we need the technology to actually simplify this and roll up the prompts for us as just a series of clicks, because we're not so smart as in some way of formulating these things, and it's sort of putting something that should have been simple into the realm of the expert now. So we need to simplify it again.
So is what you described, is that the anticipatory interface, or do you think there are other aspects of that you envision that would make it anticipate what people need?
Oh, I think that's the start, but I think, anticipatory, it's difficult to say, isn't it? Anticipatory systems are going to continue to, we're going to have dynamic paths through applications based around options, based on the context and who you are and what you typically ask for. So this will involve, basically doing continuous analysis on particular users, so that you or I might have a completely different experience using an application based on who we are and what we want to get out of that and our specific set of skills. So I think this is definitely a new pathway of software. The question in it is, and I operate a lot in Europe, and I see some of the laws there. Are these systems going to be allowed to anticipate what people are doing? Because is that an invasion of privacy? Is reading the mind an invasion of our privacy? So maybe the US will be okay. Maybe Europe will miss out again on this.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Yes, right. It's a mixed bag, I guess. You give and you take. I think probably most people who are following this industry or in this industry would agree that we've never really seen hype about AI at this level, especially in the last 2 years since ChatGPT came out on November 2022, I think it was. Generative AI applications have exploded in popularity, and I have to say that I've sometimes felt that the hype oversells what these tools are actually capable of. We're also learning, for example, that the idea of human in the loop, which is very much can be about a good role for people and a necessary role for people, can also be about the modern day equivalent of sweatshops, which is something that was just recently covered on the 60 Minutes news magazine show over here in the US. So where, people are typing labels onto images so the AI can quote unquote recognize them.
Yeah.
What's your view of the reasoning ability or other kinds of what we might call intelligence of the current AI?
It's not intelligent, really, in the way that we think, but yet it would pass Turing's intelligence test, because, as you remember, Turing said, the way we'll look for intelligence is you have a human and they're communicating without seeing, a human and an algorithm, and if they can't tell the difference, then we'll determine that the AI or the algorithm is sentient. And he of course, that was called the imitation game, as his experiment. But I think ChatGPT and other generative AI would pass that. And indeed, there's some great websites where you can go and go and do it. Does that mean it's intelligent? No, it's just very good at understanding how sentences are constructed because of this, massive neural network that essentially, has captured all of these possible patterns and can indeed generate from those patterns, but that doesn't necessarily mean it can adapt to circumstances, and it's still a little bit dumb. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to make tremendous progress, but I think we need a new Turing test of intelligence, because I don't think that goes far enough. And things like, could it start up its own business and run it? Well, some people have done these kind of experiments, but really, could it adapt to different circumstances? I mean, for me, I'll see AI truly coming into its own when it can do the ironing and put the clothes away, and that's when robotics and AI come together. But to get into your to really get into your question, I think the real key to not having the sweatshop, I fully agree with that comment, because often a human gets alerted when there's an exception, and I want to see the humans elevated, because it's all about making, to me, most successful software is when humans become hundreds of times more productive than they would without it. And that, to me, it needs to be the AI that's the slave. So an accountant, I'm on the board of Sage, accounting and finance specialist. They have a co-pilot that can assist the accountant or the business person to have you filled in the form? Would you like me to complete this tax return, and do various tasks in assistance, so that a human becomes much more productive. It's like having a range of apprentices in SER. It's about having the intelligent content assistant that can advise you about documents, can answer your queries, can do a superhuman search across so that you don't have to do it manually. That is where the, deep learning, recognizing things, generative AI interfacing with, providing you that right interface, and indeed with, anticipatory interfaces, we're going to take that further. That's where the benefit comes from. But I fully agree, there is a danger that we thought AI would replace the jobs of people working in supermarkets or stacking shelves. Actually, it's going to replace the low-skilled knowledge worker, or certainly certain things. So we need to make sure the knowledge worker becomes much more productive.
What kind of advances are necessary? And I'm thinking like the underlying technology. Maybe it's more advances in neural nets, maybe it's quantum computing, for AI to become truly intelligent. And what do you think of the prospects for that ever happening?
The rate of progress at the moment is impressive, but we're still working with a neural network based model, but it's being refined tremendously. But can it really adapt? And one of the areas I was always very interested in was sort of genetic algorithms, automatically. We've seen now that we can use generative AI to actually essentially write new code. Now, could we write various, many millions of different permutations of different scenarios, and effectively have the AI evolving to solve particular problems? And I explored this once in the area of algorithmic and high frequency trading, so having genetic thousands of different variants of an algorithm, and seeing which one would be making more money depending on the circumstances, and then swapping that one into the market and swapping out one that's being less productive. So I sort of see it a bit like that. Can algorithms continuously evolve? And I remember watching the original Terminator, and it was all very amusing when you could see what was going on inside Arnold Schwarzenegger's head. It was sort of 6502 machine code, but it was sort of writing the code dynamically, and I thought, that's very interesting. So I guess it's sort of, a bit of ChatGPT rewriting Arnold Schwarzenegger to dynamically adapt to circumstances, and that's where I wonder if we might see some interesting things. But I'm not sure about, just carrying on the path we're on. We'll keep refining, but I think we have to have a little bit of adaptive nature. And you're right, maybe it requires a new power of computing as well to do the next generation of technology. Maybe it is quantum computing indeed, but yeah, certainly interested to see what happens next.
So you've said that you think 2025 could be a game changer in terms of truly useful applications of AI. Why do you think the coming year could be so pivotal?
Because look, you've made a really key point earlier that we might be heading into the trough of disillusionment with generative AI, because does it actually deliver any real applications other than doing a great job completing your homework or writing your speech? And let's face it, it is amazing. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic. But what about the business value? I do think we're going to see a whole set of real business value delivered in 2025. And that's, I think, going to be the key. And that's certainly, we've done essentially a series of roadshows and offered this ability to come into our customers and say, look, let us come in and do a workshop and show you the ROI that you can achieve with real use cases around sentient documents and around adding smarts to various document processes. That's our area, but other businesses are going to do this. But it's going to be about purposed AI, and you're going to see, I think, domain-specific AI solutions. So you're going to have not, just large language models. You might even see, I don't know if we'll call them small language models, but certainly something that's purposed to a domain-specific large language models that know about particular areas and can actually add value in an industry vertical or in a particular problem type or in a particular domain. And I think that's where you're going to see the value added.
You've been involved in starting and running lots of tech companies in your career. I'm wondering, what did you learn from those experiences that seem to be most relevant to your vision today, what you've been saying about intelligent documents and about AI and other things you're working on?
Many lessons. I mean, I could bore you for hours and probably will. But at the heart of every business that I've run, it always starts off with a vision. And that vision has to be around that there's a real need to solve a particular customer problem. And that customer problem has to be something that has a lot of business value, and it has to be something that they're struggling to solve using other techniques. And there's got to be an aha moment that a new approach can be used, whether it's bringing things together or applying a new technology to solve that problem. So that's always been at the heart of it. And in my current business, SER, that's all around how to make knowledge workers 100 times more productive by bringing together AI-powered document understanding along with smart automation of processes and the ability to store, manage, search, archive, share documents at a massive scale, all assuming that businesses now have a whole range of enterprise systems in a best-of-breed world that themselves are little silos of process and documents that are not connected together. So the idea is you need to bring all that together. You need to be able to really streamline the automated understanding of documents coming into the business, of superhuman searching and sharing of documents within the business, and this can really improve the productivity. It's always something along those lines. And another lesson I've learned is you always have to try and make the human more productive, because I think that's where the secrets happen. And if you put customer success at the heart of what you do as your number one premise, along with having fun, then you won't go too far wrong.
Now, you've talked about a lot. You're involved in a lot of things at SCR Group. Anything else you care to share with our listeners that you're working on, or new fields that you're exploring?
We're doing all sorts of exciting things. We are taking our intelligent content automation forward to the next level, and one of the things that we expect to happen, along with all the things we've talked about in this session, is we think that there could be very interesting integrations into the metaverse with and augmented reality with the world of content and automation. And again, it's going to come down a lot to privacy laws, because I can tell you there's nothing I'd love more than to walk into a networking event with my smart glasses on, which are becoming more ubiquitously available now. And I think we're going to see in the next couple of years things that are really quite exciting. I'd love to be able to look around and it to be connected to my my sort of network, and to say, okay, right, this is David. We last met, in 2023. You're, the editor of Tech Target, and so on and so forth. So I get augmented information about what I'm doing, the ability to go in and explore documents visually, and to be able to have, sort of anticipatory interfaces with direct manipulation. I think this is going to be, very exciting. I was sort of surprised when Apple brought out their Vision Pro that it was so massive and clunky. I waited, years and years and years with all the sort of expectation around, does it really exist? Is it coming? Is it going to be smart glasses? And then it was really cool. I loved trying it, but it's not very convenient to use. I think probably the Meta angle is going in a more interesting direction. But that's one thing where I see some interesting convergences again. But again, it's going to come down to European privacy laws. Is that going to be allowed? Well, Meta hasn't even released its smart glasses in Europe because it's worried it's going to fall foul of the European AI laws and be sued for up to some ridiculous percentage of its revenue. So, is all this going to be stifled in certain parts of the world?
Well, John, this has been an interesting discussion, and I really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.